All right, so chapter 19, section 2, the title of it is Reaction and Revolution. All right, so we're going to get into a couple of interesting things. So, Congress of Vienna. After the defeat of Napoleon, European rulers wanted to restore the old order. The great powers, which would be Great Britain, Austria, Prussia, and Russia, met at the Congress of Vienna in September 1814 to arrange a final peace settlement. These leaders of Congress, or the leader of this Congress, was the Austrian Foreign Minister, Prince Clemens von Metternich. He claimed that he was guided by the principle of legitimacy. This meant that monarchs from the royal family that had ruled before Napoleon would be restored to their positions of power in order to keep peace and stability. Underline that. All right, so legitimacy means that you are the what? You're the person that's supposed to be the ruler, right? The legitimate ruler, implying that Napoleon was the illegitimate ruler. He rose to power. He took power, right? He basically said, I'm in charge. Make sense? All right? He says, this guy comes in, Metternich, and he says, no, we're going to restore everybody. The great powers rearranged territories in Europe because they believed that this would form a new balance of power. For example, to balance Russian territorial gains, new territories were given to Prussia and Austria. So the thought concept is this. If everybody kind of has equal power, people won't want to fight anymore. Does that make sense? Does that really work often? No, it doesn't, right? Most of the time, people who have still want more. It's kind of that insatiable attitude of, I want more, I want more. You're taught at a young age that sharing is caring. Well, most of the time as you get older, most people get greedy and they want more and more and more for themselves, right? So we'll see if that works out. The arrangements, this is the conservative order. The arrangements that were worked out at the Congress of Vienna were a victory for rulers who wanted to stop the forces of change that were begun by the French Revolution. These rulers, like Metternich, believed in the political philosophy known as, underline, conservatism. Conservatism. This is a term that we hear today. You're going to hear a couple terms today, or at least one term today, maybe one tomorrow, that you will hear if you turn on any news source, on any news channel, or newspaper, or internet source that is covering the news today of the United States. You will hear of conservative and liberal. Those are two words that you will hear all the time. And depending on which news source you're listening to, you will be hearing the negatives of one or the other and the positives of one or the other. All right? So we see this word pop up, conservatism. Conservatism is based on tradition and social stability. Underline that. Most conservatives favored obedience to political authority and believed that organized religion was crucial to the order in society. Remember we talked about that last week, right? That when we saw the reign of terror coming around and these people, what did they try to do? They tried to wipe out religion. If we can get rid of religion, remember we talked about it being kind of a stabilizing factor. I use the term crutch, not in a negative way. Crutches should be viewed in a good way when you need them, right? Like it helps you. If you don't have your crutches, what ends up happening? You fall, you get hurt more. Some people have used the term crutch of religion as a negative over time. I don't necessarily view it that way. I think somebody's faith is a good thing to fall back on, is a good thing to have as your baseline to help you get through things. Does that make sense? All right, so conservatives believe that having a strong religious backing in your country or a strong religious base is a good thing. All right? Most conservatives favored, don't forget that they also favored kind of this obedience to authority, political authority. Conservatives hated revolutions and were unwilling to accept demands from people who wanted either individual rights or representative government. All right? That's not necessarily the case today when you think of conservatives, the thought process of conservatives. To maintain the new balance of power, Great Britain, Russia, Prussia, Austria, and then later France agreed to have meetings that would maintain peace in Europe. These meetings were called the Concert of Europe. Such a cute name. Eventually, most of these great powers adopted a principle of intervention. Underline this. This is important. According to this principle, you can keep underlining, the great powers had the right to send armies into countries where there were revolutions in order to restore legitimate monarchs to the throne. So, what does that mean? You've answered a lot of questions. I want somebody else to raise their hand and talk. Go ahead.
Means that
Okay, so if my country is being attacked and falling apart because of a revolution, and your country, you're a king, and we know each other, we might not even necessarily like each other, do I have to ask for your help? No. You are allowed to do what? Just mount up and send them in. All right? Do you see how that could get ugly? What if he decides to just send soldiers in? Oh, I thought there was a revolution. Well, right? So this concept of intervention, while on paper sounds good, right? Like you're going to help me, it might not work out that way in the end. But it is kind of an interesting concept that these monarchs are banding together to make sure that they all stay in power. And we talked about that before, right? Monarchs tend to watch other monarchies and go, uh-oh, their people are revolting, my people might revolt. We might not like that. Is that okay? So it is interesting. So Britain refused to accept the principle, arguing that the great powers should not interfere in the internal affairs of other states. Makes sense, right? I think Britain's onto something. I don't know that if I'm having a problem in this country, unless we ask for help, that any other country should come into our country and try to fix that. Imagine if, I would say this summer was filled with some turmoil, right? Think about it. We had cities burning, whether we agreed or disagreed with the protests, that's not what I'm asking. It looked bad, right? If you were from the outside looking in on our country, what if all of a sudden, I don't know, pick a country, China, right? That's a big name around, or Russia, decided to just send over troops. How do you think that would have gone? You think it was bad, it would have gotten much worse. China right now has some things going on where they are, in essence, killing a lot of their people. All right, the Uyghurs, you might have heard of them, right? If you turned on anything, you wouldn't. If you read that word, you probably wouldn't pronounce it that way, but that is the way it's pronounced. The Uyghurs, it's basically a genocide that's happening. All right, the Chinese government is basically killing a lot of its people. Are we sending people over there to just start bombing and fighting? And no. Now, diplomatically, we're trying to reach out and say, hey, we probably, as a country, why are you doing this? You should probably stop. It doesn't look good on the world stage. These are human beings. These are civil rights issues. Again, they don't have civil rights over there. It's a communist country. But we are a leading nation in the world, and so we will reach out. But could you imagine if we just sent troops over? That's an act of war. China could then turn and launch missiles at us if they wanted to, right? So it could get very dangerous. So I think Britain was pretty smart to say, whoa. We'll deal with our own problems. You deal with yours. And if you need our help or we need your help, we will ask. Makes sense, right? All right. You don't run over to your neighbor's house and involve yourself in their situations, do you? Right? You just don't. That would be weird if you were just running over. Hey, what's going on over here? Figured I'd come and help you guys out a little bit. I don't know if your neighbors would be happy with that all the time. So, but the other great powers used military force to crush revolutions in Spain and Italy. So they did use this principle of intervention. Forces of change. I'm going to get through this section. Excuse me. Forces of change. Between 1850 and 1830, conservative governments tried to maintain the old order, but powerful forces for change were also at work. One of these forces was, underline, liberalism. Keep underlining. Liberalism was a political philosophy based on Enlightenment principles. We've talked about the Enlightenment ad nauseum, right? All people are capable of doing all great things, and you don't need anything outside of yourself to succeed. And we all are available to reason and fix things, and we can achieve great things on our own, right? Those are kind of these Enlightenment thought processes. Liberals believed, underline, that people should be as free as possible from government restraint. They also believed in the protection of civil liberties, which are the basic rights of all people. Most liberals wanted religious toleration and the separation of church and state. They believed that the laws should be made by the representative assembly, which is the legislature, elected by qualified voters. Many liberals favored government ruled by a constitution. They believed that written constitutions would guarantee civil rights. Liberals did not believe in a democracy in which everyone had a right to vote, however. That's interesting. So think about how that kind of weirdness there. Everybody's great. Everybody has these rights. All your rights are special. Protect all of you. But you all shouldn't be able to vote. Huh? Right? Like, does that make sense? I'm a logical individual. I'm a believer in 2 + 2 = 4. Right? Well, that's like 2 + 2 = 7. It's interesting. Why wouldn't they want everybody to be able to vote? Mike, why do you think they wouldn't want everybody to be able to vote? If everybody's great and everybody has all these abilities, why would these people in power not want everybody to vote?
Because if everyone was able to vote, then they want it like to come out how they wanted it to come.
What do you mean? The elections wouldn't come out how they wanted it?
Like it was just like this. They'd like collapse each other because it would be very like lopsided.
Okay, it could be lopsided, and it probably wouldn't be in their favor sometimes, correct? See, if you can control who votes, you get to control who wins usually, right? That's not saying that you have to cheat per se. I'm not saying that, but if I'm able to only control that rich people vote, they'll probably vote for the person that supports the rich. You see how that works, right? Like I don't have to cheat if I have that in the laws of voting, do I? No, that's who's allowed to vote. So they probably didn't want all these people voting because you have kind of a lot of variables involved there. And there's always a lot more poor people than there are rich people, right? Correct? That's just kind of the way the world works. So understand that it's interesting that they supported all these great things, but in the end, you know, I'm a big believer in actions speak louder than words. Their actions didn't necessarily show that they believed all those things, okay? They feared mob rule, and they thought that the right to vote and hold office should be open only to men of property. Isn't that interesting? If you own property, you probably have what? Money, which equals power, right? It's like, so let's think about that. Another force for change underlined was nationalism. Nationalism arose out of people's awareness of being part of a community with common institutions, traditions, language, and customs. This community is called a nation. Nationalism, nation. Pretty simple, right? After the French Revolution, nationalists came to believe that each nationality should have its own government. The Germans were separated into many different states, but wanted a single German nation with one central government. Hungarians are part of the Austrian Empire, but wanted to establish their own government. Conservatives feared these changes and tried hard to repress nationalism. But many liberals supported nationalism. Most liberals believed that freedom would only be possible if people ruled themselves. So most liberals agreed with the nationalists that each people group should have its own state. Beginning in 1830, liberalism and nationalism began to change the political order in Europe. In France, liberals overthrew the Bourbon king Charles X and established a constitutional monarchy. Louis Philippe, a cousin of Charles X, became king. Nationalism brought changes in other countries. Belgium rebelled against the Dutch Republic and became an independent state. There were also revolutions in Poland and Italy, but they were crushed by the Russians because of that whole we can work together, right, type of thing. Now, nationalism. We've probably talked about this a little bit in this class before, right? Is nationalism a good thing? What do you think? Sometimes. That's a great answer. And I saw you do the, maybe. Yeah, I think nationalism is a great thing sometimes, right? I think it can be used in a very bad way. When I'm at a sporting event and people start chanting USA, that's nationalism. It's pretty cool, right? When you're at the Olympics and you're winning and everybody feels so good about their countries, that's a good thing. When you take Nazism and extrapolate it to that you're the only good thing, it becomes a bad thing, right? America is a great country. It would cease to be a great idea if America decided that every country needed to be what? Destroyed and be American, right? A lot of people say America tries to do that a lot, that they stick their noses in things that they shouldn't. I'm sure there's been times over the years that America has done that, right? If you know history, they have. They kind of think they know what's best. However, America is the country that tends to be the one that's looked to by many in the world as a guiding light, as a good thing. And so sometimes I think America gets ahead of itself, right? A lot of these countries that hate America because we're so nationalistic, right? Americans are very excited to be Americans until recently. We see a switch, right? We have our flags everywhere. We start the school day. We used to, at least when we were having normal school, doing the pledge, right? We sing before each sporting event, right? A lot of people think that America should kind of back up and not open their mouths. Those same countries are the countries that are longing for America to be involved when they're at war with another country, or with their hand out needing money, and America is a very giving country, right? Look at the countries that give to other countries. We are at the top of that list all the time, even though we are in debt. All right, so look at where our soldiers are around the world, right? So we are a giving country. However, like I said, we can overstep our bounds sometimes. I think it becomes dangerous when we do one of two things extremely one way or the other. Meaning, if we pull back everything and only care about America, that becomes bad because then we don't care about other people, right? We forget. We become very internal. Or if we worry too much about other countries. A lot of people got very upset with one of the stimulus packages. If you paid attention to any of that, one of the stimulus packages had, well, both of them had billions of dollars going to other countries when it was a United States stimulus package. Do you see how people could get upset with that from our country? But what does that make us look like in the eyes of the other countries? Pretty good, right? So it kind of, again, I'm not involved in making those decisions. I'm sure it's very difficult to make some of those decisions. How do we give money to this country, but when our people are starving, no, I don't want to make those decisions. But there's a balancing act with nationalism. If you go too far one way, it gets ugly. Either way, right? We are going, in my opinion, my humble opinion, we are starting to go the opposite direction. We went from being a very proud nation to now people say what? I hate America, and they live here. That's a dangerous way to go that way too, because then you start to see these kind of fractions inside of your country, right? We are an interesting country. Look around your room, right? I'm not preaching here. I'm just stating facts. Look around this classroom. Lots of different types of people in this country, right? We all have to try to figure out how to get along, and our cultures meld, and it's a pretty cool thing about our country. Go to another country. Go to China. You look around that classroom. Guess what you see? Chinese people, right? So we have this interesting lens that we have to look through at our country. Do we get it right? You've heard me say this a million times. Do we get it right all the time? Nope. But I think we try. And I think that's a good thing. And so when we go one way or the other too far, we get very dangerous. I don't think we should be all gung-ho American, like, yeah, we are the best. And I don't think we should be the other way. We're awful. There should probably be a middle ground there of, hey, we're pretty good. You know what I mean? That's kind of how I feel about it. I look at it like I look at my kids. Right? I had to yell at my one son yesterday, right? I had to get on him for a little bit. And then I was talking to another one of my friends. I was like, man, I had to really go at my kid today, right? And he was like, really, what happened? I said, and I started with, he's a good kid. You see, right? Like, I know he's good. Therefore, I don't have to go that far off on him most of the time. You see the difference? There's got to be a middle ground there. And I feel like that's nationalism. Be proud of your country, but don't be dumb and think that it's the best thing in the world. What can we do to fix things? And that's where I think we get better. Does that make sense? I think it does, right? I think it does. At least in my mind. Nationalism is a good thing. Don't let it get too far, all right? But also don't go the other way. I hate our country. I think our country does some things pretty well. Not everything, but most things. All right, so we're done those. I'll pick up again tomorrow.